Welcome back, everyone. My name is Paul Cummings, CEO and founder of Whole Cyber Human Initiative. Thank you for joining us with the CPF Coaching, Making Your Tech Cyber Careers Flourish for 2023. Our next guest is Nadja. She has a very, very interesting topic that really hits home when if you're a whole cyber candidate, about creating emotional firewalls. As we've seen some chatter already, we got people that are burnout, overloaded on resources, burnout on job seeking. Without further ado, the floor is yours, sis.
Thank you, Paul. I'm very excited to be here. So, can everyone see my screen? Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay. So I cannot see the chat yet very well, so I'll try to monitor the chat as I go. But if there's any question, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. So I'm going to talk about emotional intelligence. I will explain what I mean with emotional firewalls, and give you, my hope for this presentation is to give you some context and give you 5 practical ways that you can start thinking about when it comes to whether, if you're already in cybersecurity, transitioning into another role, more a leadership role, or getting the foot in the door, and how emotions actually play a very important part in carving your own path out for success and also avoiding burnout. So a little bit about me before we begin. So I've worked at NATO, the world's largest security and military organization, for nearly 2 decades. I've always worked in the area of communication information agencies, so I'm really well conversed in the environment of digital transformation, cybersecurity, and information technology. So I've worked with a lot of STEM professionals, science, technology, engineering, and maths. I have over 20 years of experience working with military as well. I started out at the Ministry of Defense. I have to look in this camera because I have 2 cameras. And I started out at Ministry of Defense, and then I transitioned into NATO. And this is how I built my career up. And I started out actually as secretary, and I climbed up the ladder until I became senior executive over a span of 15 years. So I understand what it means to transition in a different role, and upskilling and reskilling, and also the impact it has on us mentally, on our intellectual capacity and our emotional intelligence, and also our energy levels. I left NATO. I resigned because I really wanted I actually succumbed to burnout. And for me, it was an aha moment. What do I want to do with my life? So I said, I'm going to start my own consultancy and really combine emotional intelligence in this industry to really help people use emotional intelligence as a toolkit to navigate the challenges. I had no idea I quit before the pandemic. I did not know a pandemic was going to come. Maybe that would have dissuaded me of becoming an entrepreneur before the pandemic, but everything happens for a reason. I love science. I am a big positive psychology nerd. Positive psychology studies on what makes people happier, what makes people motivated, how do we use science to adopt a growth mindset, right? Which is very important, especially when we talk about career transition. And in general, I'm very passionate. I'm very passionate about many things. So you may find me speaking with my hands, but I love emotional intelligence. I love to speak as well. So every time I get a chance, I can come across maybe sometimes as too passionate. So I do apologize in advance for that. What's in store? So first, I'm going to show the actual model that I work with that encompasses emotional intelligence, and it's more for the professional workforce. So it's a lot of times when we hear, and I would love to hear from you in the chat, when we hear emotional intelligence, we think it's emotions, it's crying, or it's, and a lot of people use it at the surface level, but there's a whole science behind it, actually. And I will explain what that science is in a very practical way. And I will also link it to emotional firewalls. And why I use the word emotional firewalls, because especially in the security industry, in the technical industry, the relationship between technical firewalls is much easier made than why emotional intelligence is so important. And then I will walk you through the 5 key elements, 5 key aspects on how you can use the emotional intelligence to boost your career, and how do you build a strong sense of self, which is really important in any career transition, but especially in this very competitive, saturated market. How do you communicate effectively? I think some presenters already touched upon it, that your technical expertise is kind of like your elevator, but your trajectory upwards is your emotional intelligence, right? You need the people skills as well, the social and connections in order to get ahead. We talked a lot about networking, which some people are very comfortable with and others not so much. And it's all about understanding where you sit in that spectrum and how you can work on that. How do you build your social capital, right? Relationships. I mean, we all talk about relationship, but again, it's not as easy to build relationships. It's not as easy to build relationships online as well. And especially when you are already focusing on studying, researching, trying to find a job, having so much information overload, trying to, have people skills, it can feel very overwhelming. How do you bridge the technical silos? So often, at least from my experience, but I think this is a challenge in general when it comes to working. One of the major challenges companies face is how do you make cybersecurity relevant for the other departments, right? A lot of departments do not see it as a business risk, or maybe they understand it's a business risk, but it doesn't necessarily change their day-to-day cyber hygiene behavior. And the security awareness, and how do you make security exciting? How do you make security a way of life? What do people do when they're left with their devices all by themselves is really an important part. And then the stress, right? Master stress before it masters you. This is the part when it comes to burnout. And I'll explain why stress in itself is not a bad thing, but how to make the difference between acute stress, short-term stress, and chronic stress, which that leads to burnout. I just see Jeff, I do the same, could be Mediterranean, Middle East. Yeah, I think it's in my DNA, but when I'm fired up, I'm fired up. So before I start, so this is actually, there are 3 general schools of thoughts when it comes to emotional intelligence. I think we all know the Peter Salovey from Yale University. So there's an emotional intelligence center. There is Daniel Goleman as well, who has 4 main areas of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, management, and empathy. But this one was created by psychologist Bar Raven On and developed by the Multi-Health Assessment Center in Canada, and it was developed for the workplace. How do we make it functional, right, for the workplace? You can use it in your personal relationships as well, but the main aim, it was designed for leadership performance, engagement, performance levels at the workplace. So it's an actual toolkit that I call, that helps you navigate your challenges through a new lens, through this model. When we talk about our cognitive skills, our cognition, so everything we use, analytical thinking, critical thinking, etc., that is more for long term, for foresight. The emotional intelligence toolkit helps you to deal with your immediate challenges. What do I do if I get rejection after rejection? How do I navigate an interview if I don't know the answer or I'm put on the spot? How do I think on my feet when something happened in the morning in my personal life and I'm still stressing out about that? So these are all immediate challenges that have that our emotions impact our behavior. And are there any questions? And the host muted me, so I don't know if that is a hint that I need to take or So I can continue, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think it was just a keyboard hiccup.
Okay. So this is the model, and I will go through each of these skills. So each model has 5 skills. So I will go briefly through each of the skill. But before I do that, I want to make the link with the emotional firewalls, right? So when we feel safe, when we feel, for example, right now, I hope you all feel safe. You have your coffee, your tea, or you just had lunch, or maybe people are going to have still have food. Our sensory input, so not only what we are thinking, but what we are perceiving, right, through our senses, signals to our brain that we are safe. There's not necessarily any threat or anything to worry about. So the sensory input is not necessarily activating our amygdala, which is the part of the brain that causes fear, aggression, and anger, part of it. The result is that we feel safe. So then we are functioning from our prefrontal cortex. This is where we reason objectively. This is where we can have, we can focus more. Our mental energy is more focused on being reasonable, objective, because we don't necessarily feel any stress, right? So this is when we feel safe. When we feel stressed, this is what happens in a nutshell, right? If, for example, I'm going to use a very unorthodox example to give you the importance of why information overload and the daily stressors impact our cognition and our behavior. Imagine that you are having a non-domesticated tiger in the corner of your home. Now, unless you are someone who is not afraid of tigers, I think everyone is afraid of prey animals, you're going to feel a sense of threat, right? So your amygdala is going to be activated and your brain is signaling danger. So your main organs are going to be activated, but you're going to go in stress response, which is the classic fight, flight, or freeze mode. So you're focusing from your hippocampus part of the brain, which is very limited in the sense that your brain is a body energy regulator. Means that the most important job for our brain, and this is a very bold statement backed up by neuroscience, is not necessarily to think, but to survive, right? To keep us alive. So imagine that tiger represents the daily stress of hearing no, or having a rejection email, or having too much on your plate, or having a difficult conversation with a colleague or a boss or whatever it is. So these stressors cause the same impact on our brain. And we now live in an era, because of the digital overload, because of all the invisible fears and stressors we have, that our brain is constantly, perhaps in some shape or form, in a stress mode, which makes it difficult then to process new informations, to manage our energy in a way that we can keep going. And this is where emotional firewalls comes in, because when we talk about, change happens to us, but disruption happens within us. So when we are transitioning out of a military career, in this case, into a new civilian security career, this requires new skills. So the challenge is higher than the baseline of your skills, which creates negative emotions, which creates discomfort. It's a normal process. But if you don't manage this process correctly, you're going to be depleted at a certain point. So it's normal that when the challenge is higher, you need to increase your skill set, right? And the more you increase your skill set, your challenge will decrease, and then the challenge will become less demanding. So this is called the flow model by a very famous Czech professor. I cannot pronounce his name, but it's I will add his name in the chat later on. But he came with the flow model to actually help people to find their sweet spot, to understand that when they are in stress response, so if you're functioning from, even if you don't necessarily realize that you're stressed or that you're having certain fears, for example, If you want to apply, we just talked about if you don't meet all the criteria and it bothers you internally, you think, well, there's a high chance that I don't get in because I'm lacking these technical requirements or whatever experience it is. That puts you in some sort of stress response. And if you're going to learn or if you're going to research or upskill from that space, it's going to take up a lot of your energy, right? You're going to feel more negative emotions about it, and it's going to be more tiring. Versus, I'm not saying that you should be Hakuna Matata, be excited about it. Obviously, yes, but if you can come to a place where you're in a more neutral, right? You really focus on what you need to do and learn without giving it a lot of labels, without giving into your fears, acknowledging them, right? Having a reality check that I lack these skills, but I can do this course, or I can do this practical experience, or I can talk to this person to increase my skills without necessarily adding an additional layer of stress, of fear, of, the internal dialogue. It will increase your energy, or at least will not deplete it so much. So this is a really important sequence or cycle to understand, that be mindful of how you actually use your brain. Multitasking is a myth. Multitasking depletes us at the superficial level. It switches from one task to the other, but it takes up a lot of energy. When we are processing new information, we have to be in our, in order to be really focused, it's better to be in the prefrontal cortex of our brain. So we need to be focused on the task without all the other distractions. So those things come into play, and also the way you learn, your environment. This is why I have incense, because for me, it gives me really nice, calm feeling. And I'm much better in my, much better at what I do, in my element, because I feel safer, right? So there's a science and psychology behind it.
I love that. That brings up some points where, growing up, I was taught, as you go to sleep, put something on that you want, like an audio book that you want to sleep to. And because you are in that prefrontal, you're actually gaining more of it because you are in a restful state.
Exactly. I also tell people, I mean, when you wake up, if it's the first half hour, or at least first, hour, best first hour, and when you wake up and 1 hour before you go to sleep, if you can leave technology actually alone, it will tremendously shift your life, shift your ability to learn. So you get your sleep cycle right, which is different for different people. Some people can have enough at 5 hours. I need 7 to 8 hours. But when we wake up, our subconscious mind transitions into our conscious mind, right? And if we're immediately bombarded with technology, with emails, it creates a stress response. So we really need to have our own routine, whether it's sports, whether it's reading, whether it's just having a coffee, whether it's meditating, whatever helps you start your day off on the right foot. The first hour of the morning, a lot of people say, I don't have an hour, Nadja. I have a lot of offspring. I have offspring too. When he's there, I don't always have an hour, but I really do not touch my phone the first half hour minimum. I really allow myself to wake up in the right mindset and prepare myself for the day, so I don't get overwhelmed by the stressors of the day. And 1 hour before you sleep, if you can really disconnect from technology, because what you feed your mind before you sleep, your subconscious mind, right? It's just a transition of the different brain waves. So that can really help with your ability to increase your focus and to process information. And the other important part is the importance of learning by doing, right? I think failing has got a lot of stigma, but failing is important because it allows the brain to define new response options. And I'll come back later on to incident response plan, why simulations are so important, to fail in a safe space in order to really master those skills. But if you fail, don't create a story that is related to your self-worth, but it's like, okay, what overcome the emotion? What does the data tell me? How can I do this differently? It helps the brain create, okay, next time I need another, right, shortcut, because it's learning new information. It's hard. We focus so much on learning new information, but it's harder to unlearn, right? And especially when we transition, because there's so many habits and many models and many beliefs that we have that have formed the basis of kind of who we are, how we think, how we go in life. And then to kind of change that creates a lot of stress. So you need to manage that as well. What is your viewpoint on meditation to help with those self-affirmation? So I'm a big fan of meditation, but not necessarily in the way that, in the sense that you just sit down and quiet your mind, because I don't, it's also been proven you cannot quiet your mind. If I tell you, don't think about a domesticated tiger, everyone will think about a domesticated tiger. It's important what meditation does. It allows you to, energy flows where attention goes. It allows you to give your mind a rest by focusing into your senses. As human beings, sometimes we forget that we have a sensory system of smell, touch, hearing, which is so important because we also pick up information. But because we are, especially if you're in cyber, well, we all now work with computers, but especially in this industry, if you are, depending what specific role, but if you, for example, detecting all the time, you're constantly being attacked. Your mind is constantly working. So meditation can be challenging in the beginning, because can you imagine if you're just, just trying to put your focus into your body, or it's basically putting your focus on one thing, whether it's reading or it's not necessarily on all those thoughts, right? It can be difficult because your mind can go all over the place. So it's really a really good exercise, and there are plenty of resources. I'll share them as well. Is breathing techniques. When you learn how to breathe properly, if you can do that, that is like even more important than meditation. A lot of people don't know how to breathe properly, right? And because of that, we create even more stress response, and we overstimulate our brain. So when you learn how to, and I even didn't know how to, breathe properly for many, many years. I learned this a few years ago. But when I started to breathe properly, what works for me through nasal breathing, it shifted my stress response. I'm much more calmer. I'm not triggered easily. I can focus better. So that I would give you breathing techniques. And then again, like you said, there are many different sorts of meditation. Not everyone is comfortable, but essentially meditation is focusing your energy. So if you're reading a book, that is also a form of meditation. When I spend time playing with my son, it's also a form of meditation. I'm focused on the moment with my son. If I'm cooking, it's also a form of meditation. So it's really balancing, being very mindful on your thoughts. It's not to stop them or to stop negative thinking, because that is impossible, but it's to shift, right? How it's really tricking the brain to shift. If you have, if you start worrying, which is normal, shift your brain. That is, I think it's more a way of life than 10 minutes in the morning. So how do you build a strong sense of self? And this, out of the whole model, this is the foundational pillar, especially if, if you were military, or if you had certain, core values related to your mission, related to country you serve, related to the protocols, etc. This have been part of your identity, right? And when you're transitioning into the civil sector, and now in cybersecurity again, which gets a lot of attention, and there's a lot of disruption going on, in both challenging and positive. it can really throw you off your feet. Am I good enough? Will I be able to manage this? What if I don't meet the requirements? What if, I've been behaving a certain way or thinking a certain way all my life, and now I have to rethink? All those questions come up. So understanding that how you see yourself is not necessarily fixed. This is where psychologists have actually recently shown that the assumption that we can change the way we think when we have more experience or later on in life is actually flawed. So you can develop new neurological pathways, and you can actually change, your mindset, and you can adopt a growth mindset. It's just more difficult when you've been behaving and thinking a certain way for such a long time. That doesn't mean you need to change your personality or to change your beliefs, not at all, but it does mean to always check in, what is your self-image? For example, if you believe that you can't grow into a cyber leadership management role because you're too technical or you're only skilled in one area, that's a limiting belief, right? Instead, you can say, not yet. What are the skills that I need in order to reduce the challenge, increase my skill set, and meet where I want to go? And this is how you actually overcome those limiting beliefs. It's not necessarily changing who you are, what you stand for, and your belief system, not at all. But it's important to first understand, what is your self-image? How do you view yourself? And a lot of stressors come with this, because if you don't think you can do it, or if you don't think you're good enough, or you don't have the what it takes, or you're too exhausted, it's important information, but it creates an extra barrier. So that's the first one. Second one is self-actualization. So this is how we live our potential. People who tend to have very high levels of self-actualization, they're very results oriented, right? They go after one goal after the other, etc., which in my case created my burnout, because I was a bit on the lower side of self-regard and on the high side of self-actualization. So there was a mismatch, right? And if you're on the low side of self-actualization, this is where you may feel not motivated, burned out, etc. And it's not necessarily looking at this from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity. It gives you information where you are now, so you know what you need to do to move forward, right? Step by step. And emotional self-awareness, this is key. It's your ability to understand and manage your own emotions. For example, especially in the workplace, especially people who tend to be very absorbed in technical work find it very difficult to recognize or articulate their emotions. I used to work with several bosses who had a very angry tone of voice. In their map of the world, they were just speaking their normal voice tone. They were passionate, but they were perceived as very angry, which pushed people away, right? So this is low levels of emotional self-awareness. Another example is if you feel perhaps a lot of stress from rejections you get, or from the mountain that you have to climb in order where you want to be. If you attribute that to your self-regard, for example, that is also causing stress. So helping you identify your emotions already is a huge milestone in managing them. And one trick that you can use is, instead of saying, I am sad, I am angry, or I am frustrated, you can say, I feel, whether it's to yourself or out loud, because it's dissociation, right? You're no longer identifying with the emotion, but you're acknowledging it. Normally, and you have to feel how it feels like, but if I say, I am angry, feels much stronger than, well, I feel angry. I'm not the anger itself. And then emotion is energy in motions. It dissipates easier.
So Nadja, for the veterans or the active duty that are transitioning into civilian or private sector, obviously we don't get taught empathy, through a 20-year career. What are the best strategies to learn and to be?
I will get to that actually. And empathy is the third skill. So I will. That's the social capital, if that's okay, Paul.
Absolutely.
So the second pillar is communication, right? So communication skills. So this is not necessarily about the competency of communication, but how do you connect with others, right? How do you connect with people, and how comfortable are you? Emotional expression is the degree you're comfortable in sharing your emotions. Now, when I do trainings for security people, they're very put off by this, because it's, they're used to emotions stay not in the workplace, or you don't necessarily share a lot of emotions because fear of being judged as weakness, etc. But it's important to understand when you're transitioning into a career with different personalities, different behaviors, the people who tend to have higher levels of emotional expression are perceived to aspire trust better, because the challenge, the dichotomy with security is when you have low levels of emotional expression, it's because of the confidentiality or secrecy. Like NATO, a lot of things were classified, and there was secret classifications, etc. And we had security clearances, so minimum information. But when it comes to people, it's a problem, because if you cannot connect with people, people won't necessarily trust you easily or feel comfortable talking to you or building a relationship. So understanding where you are, if you have too low or too high, because too high can also put people off, right, is important in the first place. And understand that everyone has different degrees of emotional expression. I can balance, I can have very high level of emotional expression. I match people's energy. And this is a really important strategy. When you meet people, you don't have to change who you are, but you can absorb and match their energy. So if someone has low levels of emotional expression, they're not necessarily very comfortable talking about their personal life or more about how they feel, then it is maybe in that moment, if you don't know them very well, they probably put off if you do, right? And if you meet someone or work with someone who has, then you can match that. So that is called the mirroring technique. Exactly, mirroring. Jeff, we are on the same wavelength. Assertiveness, this is an important one, because if you don't have the right balance, you can come across as very passive. So it means you have a lot of emotions bottled up. You become passive aggressive because you don't necessarily speak up, but you want to, but you don't necessarily have that high levels of assertiveness. And the opposite is aggressive. So you maybe, you may see people who are very aggressive in their tone of voice, or who it's my way or the highway, and that's called aggressive assertiveness. So it's really being able to voice your opinion in a way, thank you for sharing, curious to know more about your point of view. This is my point of view. So when you keep it on the issue and not about the person, they feel less defensive and more perceptive, right? This is how you can think about it. Often when we communicate based on the assumption we have on the other person, rather than bringing it back to the issue, and not necessarily making the other person feel defensive. Allowing, we can disagree, and I think it's important to disagree, but how do we move forward, right? Independence, this is an important one, because if you're someone who loves to work by yourself, it doesn't mean that you're not a team player. But for example, you may feel more, I'm someone with high levels of independence, so I like to be in my bubble and focus on my work, etc., and have input at a later stage. But if you're working as part of a team, and this is where the silos comes in, especially when you work in cybersecurity, you now need to be involved at the beginning so that problems stay small and the alarm is not ringed at the end, right? This is the incident response plan and crisis management. Often other departments think, we didn't think it was important, for example, and they've created even higher risk when it comes to cybersecurity. So the silo is a real challenge for companies. And if you're someone with high levels of independence, this may be a challenge when you work with cross-functional teams, right? Social capital, interpersonal skills, interpersonal relationships. It's really important for building trust, building networking, especially if you're looking for a job. I always say, if you remember one thing, seek to understand before being understood. Everyone likes to feel that there is a genuine interest. Someone has made the effort to learn what's important to us, or what is our pain point, what is our problem, or really just connecting. So I became an entrepreneur as well. I had 18 years of employee for NATO, so also civil servant. And then I became an entrepreneur, and this was like, I was used to networking and lobbying. It was my bread and butter. But now I was seen as a vendor or a consultant. So for me, I didn't necessarily make a switch, but obviously it was a really different kind of mindset. So for me, it was easier in the sense that I already was used to always network with the purpose of value, of building trust, not with the purpose of selling, because that was my mindset for 20 years. So when you go into networking, don't necessarily go in the mindset, I need a job, because believe it or not, people pick up on if we want something from them, and then they shut down because they think, they are a threat because I already have so many things to do. I don't want to have an additional burden. See what I mean? So when you really already come in with the mindset that you want to network, get to know people, get to know, their what makes them tick, what, etc. And then you'll be surprised how many opportunities can open up. Maybe they know someone that is looking exactly for the same skill set than you, and people want to help. People are very generous, but because we are also busy, and especially the cybersecurity world, if you the stress can actually cause to reject more easily, right? Or think in a very silent way rather than building that relationship. Empathy, right? Empathy is, can you not necessarily put yourself in someone else's shoes, but see things from their perspective. You're not someone else. It's very difficult to actually put yourself in someone else's shoes. I have a technique I use, and people are drained after it because you literally have to go into their map of the world, which is very difficult. But empathy is understanding that you have your point of view, you have your beliefs, but someone else may have very opposing point of views, or very different ways of doing. And that is okay. Doesn't mean that your way is wrong or your belief is wrong and theirs right. It's really having the empathy where everyone has a story, everyone is coming from a certain place. And when it comes to transitioning into cyber security, empathy is really important. Understanding the company you are applying for or the job market, their pain points, right? What is your added value? Even if you don't necessarily meet all the technical, if you can understand what their problem and show them what they'd be winning with having you in that position, how you will help them solve the problem, right? I'm pretty sure that will speak to them, because they will know someone is thinking about how can I help the company overcome, how can they kind of make their life easier. So think of it that way when you use empathy. What is the desired outcome? What does success look like? And a very important tip when applying, don't apply with your current mindset. Often we go into jobs, we apply from where we are now. Apply from from the jobs applicant's perspective 1 year, right? If 1 year from now, what is that position or person doing, right? What are the skills needed? Apply from that mindset, right? And when you do that, it already bridges that gap and also gets you more comfortable in the mindset. Social responsibility, the only thing I will say here is if when you get into cybersecurity, one of the challenges is how do we make security responsibility for all and not just the IT department of cybersecurity, right? And information security as a social responsibility is something that companies are looking into now. How can we socialize it as a cultural transformation? And so driving it as a people and a cultural change, this is where social responsibility comes in. How do you get the marketing department to take care of what they're putting out online so it doesn't increase the risk or expand the risk profile or risk vulnerabilities of the company? Problem solving. So we talked a lot about one of the key elements or skill set for cybersecurity is problem solving. People who tend to have low levels of problem solving, their emotions get in the way. And this is where I come back to emotional firewalls, right? When you're in a stress response, you may have a limited capacity to look at problems from multiple perspectives without allowing the emotions to cloud your judgment. When we feel tired, when we feel depleted, it is maybe not the best time to solve complex problem because our brain is just exhausted. So understanding your mood and also understanding how you allow emotions to enter in that realm without judgment, because we all have it, different intensities, is important, right? You want to be in the prefrontal cortex when you're solving complex problem with neutral to positive emotion, so you don't deplete your energy. Reality testing, this is really, really important when you're looking for a job, because this actually says when you, for example, if you send in an application and you don't hear for weeks, then if you have low levels of reality testing, you may come up with all kinds of reasons why, versus maybe they just didn't look at it yet, or they didn't get back to you, or whatever happened. So our ability for our mind to feel safe, it closes the gap by making up stories that are in line with our mental model on bias. So whenever you feel worry or anxiety in whatever challenging situation, always apply reality testing. What do I believe? What is actually a fact? And how do I know this, right? A lot of times it's just our shortcut mental model because it's easier for our brain, takes up less energy. Impulse control, very important to manage, because it can burn bridges, right? The time between a triggered emotion and our response option, especially when we talk about incident response plan. I've been in tabletop exercises when everything is going well because there was no real pressure, right? Then we are talking around the table, everyone thinks they know what they were going to do, but when there's actual pressure, when there's actual incident, and you know this very well from the military as well, people behave differently. People go back to their stress response, and then you have to navigate that element on top of containing the incident and doing damage control. So especially if you're going to become part of the incident response team or the crisis management team, really ensure that people are trained in these in impulse control and in this the emotional intelligence aspect as well, because that is actually the ability to stay calm, focused. I mean, military, I had this with my military training as well, will be gold during these incidents. Last one, stress. This is a big one, stress management. Flexibility, again, if you're very rigid in your way of thinking and doing, which is not a bad thing, right? We're not judging here at all, but you probably see change as something that is more threatening. So you have a more fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And for the transitioning into the cybersecurity career, it's really important to adopt a growth mindset. Not yet. I can develop the skills. I can learn what I don't know. I can learn. If you look back at your life, a lot of the things before you didn't know, maybe you didn't think you could learn or do, but you did it anyway, right? So we have to learn new skills and also unlearn old ways of thinking and habits. And that is an uncomfortable process, but we can make it even more uncomfortable by the meaning we give to it. So this is something to be mindful of. People who have low stress tolerance will be stressed out much faster, right, than people who have higher stress tolerance. So acute stress is actually important to get us into action, to increase our performance. The problem when it becomes chronic. So imagine if I have this glass of water, I'm a bit blurred. If I hold it for 5 minutes, it's okay. 1 hour, we'll see. Days, I'll be paralyzed with my arm. And this is the same way we can look at stress. And there's a lot of invisible stress. I did a pilot project with a company who measures physical stress. And one of the findings that we saw is that actually when people were relaxing, they were higher, they were more stressed. probably because of all the thoughts and the thinking that's going on, which is causing physical symptoms that we are not aware of often. So it's important to really be mindful on, keeping here as well healthy. And on optimism is not toxic positivity. I don't think we should be kumbaya, hakuna matata when things are not going well. That is actually counterproductive. But optimism is acknowledging the challenges, acknowledging the reality, but not necessarily only, focusing, okay, what went wrong in the past, but how do I get there from here? So again, start with the end in mind. When you're applying for a job or when you're looking for your next career, take some time to see yourself 1 year from now. What company are you working? What kind of job are you doing? How do you feel? Do you feel successful? Do you feel confident? Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel like, you're on top of your game? Do you feel motivated? Really take some time to think about what kind of job and what are the things that you're doing and how can that look like? Because we often function from memory, right? What was familiar to us, we know. What is unfamiliar feels very uncomfortable. This is also called the imposter syndrome, but basically imposter syndrome is everything that is new, that is unfamiliar to the mind, is perceived as a threat, which I explained in the first part of the presentation. So it is, how can you create, start with the end in mind? And that is where optimism comes in place. Like, yes, we know the challenges, but 1 year from now, how have I overcome those challenges? What new habits, what skills have I learned, etc. Imposter syndrome is a real problem in cyber, yeah. And I think imposter syndrome, I suffer from it, I think, as well. And I've read studies that in general, and I don't have the statistics, so I cannot back this up. But I did read an interesting article said that highly intelligent people are the ones that mostly suffer from imposter syndrome. But imposter syndrome is, if you understand it from a neuroscientific perspective, from a human biology perspective, it's normal. It's basically what we don't know. If we have something new that is not familiar to the mind, it creates a stress response. So we feel discomfort. So it's becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. When you're transitioning into a new career, it's really managing your negative emotion, managing your discomfort by what the story you're telling yourself, the support you're getting, the looking at, at the what you need to do to get there and understand, I'm not there yet. Well, what can I do? And really focus on building the strong sense of self, because when you have a very strong sense of self, you won't be easily triggered by what is all the demands, etc. And I think a lot of people that maybe don't necessarily invest as much time into the I don't like to call it soft skills, because I think these are vital human skills, especially now with everything that's going on. So it's really important to remember to do the inner work as much as the outer work in order to stay very solid and resilient on your job search, and also give yourself a lot of, the credit you deserve. I think working with the military has been the greatest gift, because it's, so many valuable leadership skills that are important, not only in cybersecurity, but in the world we live in today. And I think you have a lot of competencies, maybe, that are really important. So really think about everything you bring to the table, everything you did, also really important in interviews. It's kind of a risk management process, right? They interview people, which one will represent the least risk. So the more examples that you have up your sleeve to demonstrate that you are low risk in the job and the impact you've caused, the better for the interviewers. Will think, okay, this one represents the least risk. So then they will, obviously there are other factors that come into play. But if you approach it like, how can I back what I'm saying with examples of what I've done, and you have loads of examples from your military career, even if it's not specifically the same, but you know how, that you'll be able to manage a cyber incident, that you'll be able to build relationships, that you'll be able to, reduce the risk profile, those things, whatever job you're applying for. That is really important as well. So I love to write, so I write a lot, and I will be writing much more as well. So you can visit my website on the blog. I have already resources there, especially on how to the work-life balance, how to manage the invisible stressors of life. So not necessarily related to cybersecurity, but related to how do you create that balance. I also have interesting blogs on ransomware resilience and emotional effective decision making. If you're interested in leadership tools and tips on EQ, I also have a newsletter I'm launching next week. So every week I will share one specific challenge and how to use the EQ tool to overcome that. And for now, I would love to hear your questions and your challenges, and hopefully I can help, if there's still time, I don't know, to how you can use emotional intelligence. I missed a lot of chats, I see.
Just some banter, because I operate on, I guess Jeff Fields likes to call it, I operate in adrenaline most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what my stress level is.
Again, stress is not a bad thing, right? But you need to be able to relieve it, and not only on a physical level, but also on a mental level. And this is what we found with this pilot project, that when people were putting in relaxation, they had the highest stress level. It's because of and we're not necessarily taught this, right? Someone mentioned, we're not taught this in schools. Maybe now they're starting, or in life in general. So, but it's the emotional impact on our cognitive skill and behavior is very prevalent, and especially when you are transitioning, because it's it requires a new mindset, perhaps new habits. When you've been working with a set of habits and mindset for so long, it creates a lot of discomfort.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have a question per se, but I'm very excited to hear about this, because this is actually my background as well, to some extent. Stress is definitely not a bad thing. There's positive stress, negative stress. I think the issue is with continued stress of whatever that is, just the way it affects the physical body, right? Not enough stress, we get weak. Too much stress, we break down. It's kind of similar. I just remember one bizarre memory just popped up when I was in the military, where I started getting bizarre chest pains, and because I was not doing enough stuff. And they say, "Oh no, you're stressed." No, I'm not stressed. I need more stress. I need something to do, right? But because I needed the other end of things. But I think it's all about balance. And I mean, I love this topic. If you ever need an assistant, and I make good coffee, ought to be Shwaya. So we could talk. But no, it was awesome.
Connect on LinkedIn.
No, I will.
Yeah, but it's sorry. No, continue. I just want to.
No. I was just going to say thank you, and I really appreciate it. So
you're welcome. One thing I was just going to add is a lot of people actually also confuse feelings and emotions. Affect. So every human being on this planet has affect, right? The feeling. So this means that, for example, if you had a bad night of sleep, or if you have not enough glucose levels, your brain is signaling that there's not enough energy, so it's going to take it somewhere else, and this creates general feelings of, perhaps this is where the French saying comes from, hungry, right? Hangry, or you feel maybe a little bit not well. And if we're not aware, emotional awareness, we think, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm angry. We go look for reasons for why we feel that external, when actually it's a physical cause. That is affect. Now, emotions also, and I will link her name here, Lisa Feldman-Barrett, is also cultural related, because depending on your formative years, between 0 and 7 years old, this is where your mind, your mental model is formed based from your parents, your environment, etc. How did we learn to be sad in what situation, right? And I think it's very difficult. I am smiling now, but actually I could feel very sad, or I could be really happy. It's very difficult to say from someone's facial expression how they feel, even though there are a lot of startup boomings using facial recognition. It's extremely difficult because even one person can show different emotions, and you don't necessarily understand their mood. And this is also based on cultural intelligence and background. So it's a fascinating topic, but understand that especially when you are on the career hunt and job, if you're tired, or if it's important to take care of your physical energy, because it can cause these types of emotions. And sometimes people mistakenly mislead for that they are either depressed or not good enough or whatever it is. So while basically your body needs to rest, or you need to eat, or you need to sleep more, or you need to caffeine, or whatever it is. Her name is Lisa Feldman-Barrett. She has great videos, short, long, that really goes into much depth into this and gives great examples on how to understand emotions and impact on our brain and well-being. Yeah, she's very well known. Another one for breathing techniques, Andrew Huberman, he has a podcast, and he shares, his podcasts are very long, but he has captions, so you can go to the part that you're interested in. But he has, he makes it very simple for even people like me to understand it in a practical way. How can I improve my mental energy, my focus in a practical way that helps?
Thank you for the link. For the Huberman podcast, do you have any starters that you recommend? Because
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Wait a sec. Is it now better?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. With the Huberman podcast, sorry. Is there any you would recommend?
Yeah, it's the one with Dr. Jack Cranfield, I think. It's the one on breathing techniques. I really, if you learn how to breathe properly, right, doing breathing, so even more than meditation, I would say, it can literally change. It gives you more mental energy and focus, and it helps you stay calmer as well when you feel challenged.
Okay.
You will be less reactive and more responsive. And I think this is what also a lot of companies are looking for, right? For people who are able to kind of be the mountain, be strong and not react themselves, but still have that emotional connection with people, so you don't seem too cold or detached.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I do a lot of visualization exercises as well. It's basically called mental rehearsal techniques. So they use this with athletes a lot. They use it even in the corporate sector. So a very great way is when you start with the end in mind, visualize not only. So I always start with the end in mind. So visualize yourself in the spot already, and then go back. Because what happens if you start from now and then you visualize yourself, you're probably going to stop, because you're going to start from a place of lack of negative emotion because you don't know what's coming. Whether if you already see yourself 1 year from now, and you can see actually that there's a lot of possible because you are closing your eyes, so you are limiting your visual stimuli, and automatically your other senses are going to be heightened. And this is where actually, you actually can see much more clearer in detail and increase your positive emotions. And then you can see yourself, the habits. This is key. Not necessarily what are the habits that you need to master and learn and feel more positive, neutral to positive emotions, to make it familiar to the mind. And that can already decrease the discomfort with even 20%. You're still going to feel uncomfortable, right? When we do something new for the first time, it is going to feel uncomfortable, and that is okay. It is really learning how to become comfortable with being uncomfortable and what you tell yourself in that moment. I don't know it now, but I will learn it. It will work out. When you look back, every situation you were worried about worked out in one way or the other. Maybe not as you expected, but you're still alive and it worked out. And that can help you really stay calmer and also come across more confident, more posed. This is what companies want as well. It's not only, I think, your technical expertise, which is really important, but how do you present yourself? How, they want to have, again, risk management. They want to be sure that they are not taking a huge risk by hiring you. So if you can add that to the equation by really showing them with examples, concrete examples, whether you have actual experience or not, you can still use your military examples to show similar analogy on how you would overcome that challenge. I got into places I had zero experience, but I became really good in showing them, painting them an alternative and getting them excited. You want to increase their positive emotions and not, put them the defensive on. And you will notice this is maybe not a bad point to end, but this is how cyber criminals use social engineering and scam people. But you can use it to influence, right? You can use it for the good, not for the bad.
So having the right inner mindset and being confident and not doing things like this and hiding yourself away. Yep.
And preparing yourself, right? This is where visualization comes in, because if you're doing it for the first time, all the emotions are going to come out. But when you practice it in front of the mirror, you're going to feel very uncomfortable, or even record yourself or with someone, a friend. And that's okay. It's better to feel uncomfortable with them. But the more times you feel uncomfortable, the less uncomfortable you will feel during the actual interview, because the intensity of the emotion will have dissipated. So you'll be more relaxed during the interview. If you practice that part as well, not only the competency is really important, but the way you present and you communicate, and it is always think about what are the 3 key messages I want to leave my audience with. How do I want to make them feel at the end? I want to make them feel confident that they are making the right choice by hiring me. I want them to feel that there's, little risk, and I want them to feel excited for them. So I'm just throwing things in, right? But whatever you want. And when you think about it as well, you can prepare yourself for that.
I think that's a very important point, actually, for in the group chat here. To be confident, feel risk, and excited.
Yeah. Exactly. Any more questions?
Let's look.
I hope this was useful. I enjoyed talking and sharing.
No, for me personally, definitely a big thank you for coming here and sharing these views and interesting key points with us. So yes, it was definitely useful.
I'm glad. Well, I wish all of you good luck, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And thank you for inviting me, and look forward to staying in touch. It's getting quite late here, Paul, so I'm going to sign off and wind down 1 hour without technology, right, before sleeping.
It's 10 o'clock. Yeah.
And thank you again for having me.
Thank you. It was awesome.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.